Junk Food Dinner. Episode 324. Parker Baumwan is trapped in a cloud of smoke and broken dreams this week, but to overcompensate for the loss we are joined by Sebastian Bentix to discuss three 1940s classics, Doctor Cyclops from 1940, The Naked City from 1948, and The Red Shoes from 1948. Speaking of 40s, where's MPCU? MPCU, where are you?
Does anyone listen to this program except my wife?
Junk Food Dinner. The first movie that we'll be talking about in our 1940s show is Doctor Cyclops from 1940. This is a movie that I was sort of had on my radar. I would sort of see it, just the title around, and I always thought, wow, a movie about a Doctor Cyclops. That's got to be good, right? So when I was asked to be on the show, I sort of went through a list of 1940s movies that I would be interested in seeing, and this one popped out at me, and I checked it out beforehand just to make sure that I thought it was pretty good, and I liked it. So the plot is, it's sort of, there's an expedition of scientists and one guide who are asked to go to the Peruvian jungle by this your garden variety mad scientist by the name of Dr. Thorkel, which I think is a great name. He needs their help on this science experiment that he's doing, and what he needs from them is for them to look into a microscope, because one of his eyes doesn't work very well, and hence the title of the movie, Doctor Cyclops. So he summons these scientists to his Peruvian jungle lab and asks them to look at a microscope, which they do. And Dr. Thorkel says, okay, cool, the thing that I want is in there, so you guys can leave now. And so they're kind of a little bit insulted because they're big deal scientists, but so they stick around, and then they discover he's using this sort of uranium that he's pulling from a mine shaft, and he's using it to, like you do, shrink down living organisms. And so, once they find out that that's what he's doing, of course they try to stop him because, you just can't have, shrunken horses and stuff running around. But Thorkel's a smart guy, and he tricks them into a shrinking chamber, and so he shrinks down this party of scientists and their Peruvian guide down to be about a foot high, and sort of makes them his prisoners / test subjects. And basically, the rest of the movie is them trying to avoid being killed, like by the cat or by other jungle dangers, while they try to figure out how to defeat Dr. Thorkel and escape his villainous clutches. I thought this was a pretty fun movie of the time. There's, one thing I appreciated is there's a woman doctor in the party, and she gets some side eyes and stuff, but for the most part, they're pretty much cool with her, and they just, let her be a woman scientist. I really enjoyed the sort of the plot turn of like Dr. Thorkel basically just asking for one thing to look in this microscope, and then immediately he throws them out, which I think that's a good way to be when, once you've done what I need you to do, just get out of here. You looked in the microscope, that's all I need. There's sort of a leading man scientist who I like, who's really lazy. They go to him immediately and they're like, come help us with this expedition. He's like, I just kind of want to hang out here and, do whatever the 1940s equivalent of vaping is or whatever he's doing hanging out there. It's probably just smoking.
Right.
But that's all he wants to do. But they get him to come along. And there's a good scene where they're sort of arguing about size, which you could easily construe as men arguing about their penises.
Definitely.
It's something that, we all do. That's what we were doing before we started recording. But I think, when they get to the miniature effects and stuff, I think they're pretty good. They're pretty good for the time period. I mean, there have been a couple of movies that had done sort of miniature effects, but the movie is directed by Ernest Schoedsack, and it's produced by Merian C. Cooper. And I know you guys just did King Kong. I didn't pick this because of that. It was just random chance. But they're the guys that did King Kong, and it bears some cosmetic similarities. It's a jungle adventure kind of thing, and there's scale, size and scale is sort of the special effects that are being used. There's a character named Pedro who's predictably stereotypical, and poor Pedro, like, he gets the worst costume when they get shrunk. They all get these sort of like napkin togas or something, and Pedro just gets one that looks like a diaper. Like everyone else gets something more respectable, but not Pedro. He kind of gets the shaft the whole movie. There's a cat named Satanus, which I think is the coolest name ever for a cat, and if I had a cat, I would definitely name him Satanus.
Yeah.
And it growls like a demon, too. That's not like a normal cat growl.
Well, when you're small, everything sounds like a giant monster. That's
Sure.
the general rule of shrinking movies. When at one point they run afoul of an alligator when they're trying to escape into the river, and the alligator roars and stuff. But I actually thought that was a pretty fun sequence. And as far as these 1940s adventure movies go, I mean, but I like that element. I thought the radiation machine was pretty cool looking. Dr. Thorkel, thankfully, likes to speak to Satanus a lot and sort of deliver exposition to him, which is helpful because otherwise, you wouldn't know what's going on. So I like that Satanus plays an important role in the story that way. I like the oversized sets. I think that's always a fun thing in a movie where people are running around in these giant sets. And I think this movie does it pretty well. At one point, Dr. Thorkel, I think at 2 points in the movie, he just starts sleeping. Like, he gets really tired.
Well, yeah.
And, shrinking's a pretty exhausting thing to do, I guess. And so conveniently, he's like, all right, you guys, you're tiny now, and I'm going to take a nap because I'm tired. And that's good because that frees up some time for our heroes to run around. And, basically it's sort of, that's what it is. It's people running around, interacting with, animals. There's a good dog, that's Pedro's dog, who sort of does some good dog acting. And there's a shot of screeching monkeys, which I think is always the earmark of fine cinema.
Yeah, I'd say the relationship is that of like the Smurfs and Gargamel.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, the Smurfs ripped that off. They ripped off Doctor Cyclops. But I think at one point they aim like a shotgun. They're preparing the shotgun. They're gonna aim it at his head. And for a second I was like, is the movie gonna end with them like blowing off Dr. Cyclops' head with a shotgun? That would be amazing. But that's not what happens. Well, not to spoil it for you, but overall, I enjoyed it. It's fun and corny and in an old adventure movie kind of way. The characters aren't anything great. You're not going to walk away from Dr. Cyclops, feeling like you were really moved by any of the characters or anything they said. And, the script is just clunky in that way that a 1940s genre adventure is. But I think the special effects and it's a quickly paced movie, which was nice. So, I think if you like, 1930s and 40s jungle adventure movies, or if you like sort of atomic age sci-fi with mad scientists, give old Dr. Cyclops a try. So, I liked it. But what did you guys think of Dr. Cyclops?
Yeah, well, I had never seen this one before. In fact, when you brought it to us for the show, I don't think I had ever really heard of it. Like, I read a lot of old, famous monsters of Filmland, and I'm kind of hip on these older sci-fi monster movies, but for whatever reason this one kind of slipped by me. So I was excited to check it out. The first thing that struck me when watching this movie is, the movie starts off with this great scene of Dr. Cyclops doing his work in this lab that's just like bathed in this eerie green glowing light all around him. And this movie's Technicolor, which, at the time, 1940, especially the very early 40s, was kind of a luxury. Not a lot of movies came out in color. Kicking it off really kind of, showing the color with that crazy green light, I thought was a cool move and gave it a good style. Speaking of style, I like Albert Dekker's portrayal of Dr. Thorkel in terms of look. I think he nails the look of a mad scientist and looks really good. However, I think ultimately by the end of this movie, he does a fine job. He's a good actor and everything, but I almost kind of wish that he had played it a little bit bigger. Like, he's a little over the top, and we talked about in some of these older movies, the actors have a tendency to kind of ham it up or overact because they're, used to stage plays and whatnot. I feel like Dekker in this could have really made this movie memorable, and had he just really gone over the top with it. But that being said, I thought he did a really good job, and like I said, I love his look as the mad scientist with these thick glasses and the pencil mustache and whatnot. I thought he looked really cool. Like you said, the special effects in this are pretty outstanding for 1940. They capture the shrinking and they capture it pretty well. It's obviously a little dated by today's standards, but for the time, I think it looks really good. I mean, there's definitely some scenes where there's one scene in particular, like when after they've been shrunk down, he has one guy like standing on a table and he's trying to examine him and perform some tests. And there's like a scene where he like goes to like pick him up with his hand, and it's like clearly like a giant hand sweeping in and picking up this guy, like superimposed on top of Dr. Cyclops sitting at the desk. And I thought that, it was obvious at the time, but I thought it still looked really good.
It looks cool. It looked kind of like something from like a Double Dare game show or something. Like, it looked really fun.
Yeah. So I thought that was cool. And, it definitely has its corny moments, like you said. I also was kind of impressed that 1940, they had a lady scientist and didn't, make a big deal about it. So I thought that was cool. I don't think there was ever really anything where they're like, dames can't be scientists, what are you doing? It was pretty much a non-issue. So I thought that was pretty progressive. And she wasn't, she's, it's one of those movies, so the lady's going to scream and maybe faint or something. But for the most part, she wasn't really a damsel in distress. So that was cool. She kind of held her own.
Certainly, if you contrast it with King Kong, it's a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely. And not that much later, only, less than a decade later. So, I thought there were some cool optical effects with, the miniature horse and things like that. So I thought that all looked cool. I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some downtime in this movie. I think there's times when there's some bickering back and forth between the scientists before they're shrunk down and stuff. And even after they get shrunk down, there's some, back and forth and trying to figure out how they're going to get out of there. That kind of drags a little bit, but overall I thought this movie moved at a pretty reasonable clip and wasn't too bad. So overall I can see why this isn't a sci-fi classic, or at least regarded as such. But overall, if you like this kind of stuff, I think you'll have a lot of fun. I do think that they, for real, just dumped a bunch, like a pile of flaming sticks on an alligator, which I thought that would have been probably fun to pull off that stunt back in 1940. But I thought it looked cool. I thought the special effects, like I said, were impressive for the time, and overall I thought it was a fun movie. I don't know if I'm going to rush out and add this one to my collection, but I'd say if you've never seen it, it's worth a shot.
Man, Kevin Moss revealing a deep-seated hatred for alligators.
Hey, man, if I get a chance to dump flaming sticks on an alligator's head, I'm going to take it.
I would have saved a child in Orlando.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
It's only fair. That they would do it to you if they could.
Yeah, I got to get revenge on the one that took my hand.
Well, this Doctor Cyclops is not a movie that I had seen either. I wouldn't consider myself as nearly as hip as Kevin on these old-timey monster movies, but I've seen a couple. And the fact that I also had not even heard of this surprises me, because I think that there's a lot of stuff here, just starting from the fact that it's 75 minutes long. That's always a great sign for junk food dinner whenever it comes in under 90. I like that. Actually, one thing that struck me as a funny coincidence is I don't think that you knew this, Sebastian. There's really no way that you could have known this, Sebastian, when you picked this movie. But I'm going to Peru soon. So this was a fun little preview for me of what my trip might entail.
Try not to get shrunk, man.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I was already looking out for altitude sickness, and I thought maybe I might have to deal with a spider or something, but nobody warned me about these cycloptic doctors until now. So I'm very thankful that we got around to this week. There's actually a number of things about this movie that are kind of timely for us here on the show. It actually kind of bridges the 1930s theme show that we did last week and the 1950s theme show that we're going to do next week in terms of some of the talent here. You already mentioned this director, Ernest B. Schoedsack. Is that how we're going to say it?
That's how I've heard it said, but I don't know.
Because I have no idea. But we'll say Ernest B. Schoedsack. Schoedsack. Sure. Directed Son of Kong and Mighty Joe Young, and was also, I'm not sure if we mentioned, the machine gun guy on the plane that kills King Kong at the end. So that's kind of a interesting little tidbit about that guy. But also Albert Dekker is connected to next week's Kiss Me Deadly. He's the lead in that film.
And he was in a couple episodes of the Naked City TV show that came out in the late 50s.
Oh.
Ooh, wow. Yeah, a lot of connections. And I think he's also in the Wild Bunch, too. So that guy was in, some stuff. I mean, he got around. So cool that we're kind of finding these links between these movies throughout this decade's project. But yeah, I mean, probably the most notable thing for me watching this was I was really impressed, as you guys were, with the color. I mean, the fact that this looks so gorgeous in 1940. It's pretty impressive, and they do come at you with that title card right away, just advertising out of that green fog that this is going to be in Technicolor, and I like to see that in Technicolor title card before the movie. To be honest, I think that next week is going to feel kind of cheap with all like the post-war black and white movies that we're doing next week, because between this and the Red Shoes, like we have some really nice looking movies here in the 40s, which kind of surprised me. But yeah, in terms of this one, it's not just the color that I was impressed with. I think there's some really great lighting in this. Like in one of the early scenes in that mad scientist laboratory, you get to see these strobe lights that are like kind of seizure-inducing, but also like kind of stylistically interesting, I thought. Something that I hadn't really seen before. I think that miniature horse looks pretty cool. It kind of reminded me of the video game Dragon's Lair. I don't know if you guys remember that, where you would have like these little holograms that would pop out of the table, and it kind of has that effect where it looks like it's kind of popping out of the table.
Wait, no, that wasn't that was not Dragon's Lair though.
Dragon's Lair was the cartoon.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the one where they pop out of the table?
I know what you're talking about. It was from Sega. I forget what it was called.
It probably had a dragon in it.
Okay.
But yeah, that game, it's that kind of effect where it looks
called
like a hologram.
Time Traveler.
Time Traveler.
Doesn't have a dragon in the title.
Well, it could. Dragons are notorious for traveling through time. And everybody knows that.
That's true.
Point being, it looked cool. It was a cool little hologram. I liked it. I thought the lab itself looked really cool. Just pretty cool visual design in there. And I noticed on Wikipedia that this was actually nominated for Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. It lost to The Thief of Baghdad, but we're not the only ones to notice that this is a good-looking picture. And for me, that's not something that I normally associate with early science fiction. Like, I typically think of them as looking a lot more, I don't know, just static and kind of bland than this. But I was impressed in that regard for sure. You guys mentioned that this is kind of early in its genre in terms of like shrinking movies, and I would agree with that. I haven't seen too many movies before this incorporating a lot of shrinking. I like that the oversized courtyard set as well, and I can't think of too many other movies where a mad scientist takes apart like a prickly pear cactus with a shovel. I thought that was pretty cool, where he's just like freaking out, smashing that cactus up with the shovel. That was a lot of fun. There's actually kind of a lot of silly stuff in this thrown in here and there. Like the name of the research foundation that they work for is the North American Research Foundation, which is like the most generic name of all time. And a lot of silly lines in this, like the doctor at one point says...
Wait, you don't know NARF?
You got some backdoor dealings with NARF that I should know about?
No.
I like that line, though, that the doctor has at one point where he says, I've been working so hard that I lost sight of my core values, which is like a really funny thing for a semi-blind doctor to say. Mm-hmm. But, you know, it's pretty much what you guys said. It's a very lightweight movie. It looks good. It's got that cool shrinking element to it. I thought it was really silly as well that he had like a weird case of narcolepsy towards the end where he's like, oh, everything's cool. I'm just going to take a nap over here.
Well, I think they implied that he had been up for days doing his research.
I guess. But I mean, hadn't he already figured all this stuff out? Like the only missing element for him was that he didn't know that you couldn't contaminate it with iron or something. Like, I don't know.
Hey, man, no rest for the wicked.
Sure. I want to know what that guy was really up to, though. I get a feeling that there's some kind of weird cycloptic party going on down there in Peru that they're not really telling us about.
Yeah, he was find out soon.
He was shrinking down horses to put him up his ass, actually.
Could be. And the other thing that they really don't explain is, like, what happens once they... So it's kind of weird. Like, they explain that these people get shrunk down and that they're going to gradually regrow back to their normal size.
Yep.
But all that happens just right at the end where they show you a card real quickly that says months later, and then everybody's normal size again. And I feel like, hey, I wanted to see what happened in the interim. You know, maybe that cat would have came back. Maybe they would have rode a spider.
That does lead to a really kind of weirdly unsettling scene where he kills that snooty scientist with like a giant swab of chloroform. He's like, oh, you're going to grow eventually. And then he's like, I'm going to kill you. And like, he just snuffs him out with this giant, I think it's a cotton ball soaked in chloroform, which I found really unsettling for some reason.
Yeah, you didn't expect someone to get murdered like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that part was pretty gnarly, and that may be like the most violent sequence in this. I mean, overall, it's a pretty wholesome movie. You know, it's kind of like reading like an early Silver Age DC comic book or something. You know, it's got a light tone. The characters are all very pleasant, and it moves quick. It's kind of got like a little bit of a moral to it. So yeah, I thought this was fun. You know, I watched this after I watched The Naked City, and going from like that movie, which is kind of more of a downbeat tone, to go from like the concrete jungle to the non-concrete jungle, it was kind of a fun transition. So while I don't think that this is nearly as good as like King Kong, it definitely has enough elements that if you're into monster movies or into sci-fi movies or into, you know, like I think Atomic Age is the best adjective that you use to describe this. It checks those boxes for sure.
All right. Well, great. I guess that about wraps it up for Doctor Cyclops. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to shrink down to miniature size and aim a shotgun at your head.
Thanks for visiting the JFD video store. We hope you enjoyed our burning hot takes on this week's selected movie. Check us out on iTunes or junkfooddinner.com for full episodes. The audio version contains 3 full-length reviews per week, topical news segments, and listener feedback. Great for long commutes, exercise, or surviving the impending apocalypse. Thanks to Chuck Linington for the on-screen artwork. Email jfdpodcast@gmail.com or check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, or whatever else is going on. We're probably there and wanna hear from you. Until next time, keep washing them dishes.